Hello and welcome to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caparella, here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And from alien abductions to monster-infested ranches, men in black, near-death experiences, close encounter experiences and more, we speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you, and they all come from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK radio network. Well, the Lower Alloways Creek Incident, where an alleged UFO crashed in the South Jersey area in 1991, has raised a lot of questions. The incident was officially described as a helicopter crash. Robert Earl White's mother was the main witness during the incident. White has been on an intensive campaign to get to the truth about what it was that crashed. The Lower Alloways Creek Incident has everything when it comes to UFO mysteries. There's the crash landing, the mysterious men in black who show up almost instantly to threaten witnesses, alien hybrid programs, and immense cover-ups. There's little doubt that the Lower Alloways Creek Incident could have become the eastern states' Roswell. But according to White, the efforts to keep what happened in April 1991 quiet have been mind-boggling. When his mother witnessed a UFO virtually crash in their backyard late that night, what followed was like the X-Files on steroids.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Really well. I mean, that's a fascinating. It's a fascinating incident. The Alloways Creek crash. Not a lot of people would have heard of it. So, just run us through and tell us what happened in 1991.
All right. Yeah. So this took place April 21st, 1991. It was 10:18 p.m. at night. My house, to describe the area a little better for you, we just a couple farmhouses. My family's house, my mother, was right here, and my aunt's house was right here. And then behind our houses, there was a small tree line, and past the tree line, there was marshland. And there was one single road with an old bridge, a single lane bridge, old, and marsh all around it. So what happened, my aunt who lived next door in the story, my family, they used abbreviations to protect my family's identity for concerns. My aunt next door, she woke up to use the bathroom. And as she was in the bathroom, she looked out her back window and noticed something just hovering above this tree line, above the marsh and where the bridge was, which was directly behind our house. So she's watching it for, a little bit, and it's not making any sounds. It's described as having blue lights on the points, and then in the center, a white light in the center coming out. And so she goes out the bathroom, goes back into her bedroom, calls my mother next door. At the time, my mother, she was watching a baseball game with two of her friends that were also there. She hears the telephone ringing. I was 3.5, almost 4 years old. I was upstairs. She hears the phone ringing. She runs to the back of the house. She picks up the telephone. My aunt says, "Beth, go to the back window. There's something out back." My mom goes to the back window and she's looking, and my mother described it as being triangular, but it was on an angle. So it looked elongated, and it had, 3 blue lights on the tips with a white beam of light coming down the middle, just like this shirt.
Okay.
And so they're watching it. My mother's 2 friends come off the couch. They run over to the window. They're also watching this. So at this time, there's 4 different people that see it. And, I hear commotion and stuff. I take a look out my room. So now 5 people that have seen it. I was very young, so I'm using the adults official thing, because people are quick to say, "Oh, you were a child." When you see something like that, you remember it.
Exactly.
You remember it. You don't forget. If you met the president, at 4 years old, you'll remember it. So they're watching it. Then all of a sudden, sparks start shooting out of it. Then a white, flash beam of light came, hit it, and it shot straight to the ground. Immediately, my mother hung up the, immediately.
So it crashed. It crashed.
Yes, it went straight to the ground. Sparks started shooting out of it, and a white light anomaly kind of shot out of it and into it, and it just went to the ground like insanely fast. Very, very fast. So instantly, my mother hangs up the phone, and she calls 911. When she calls 911, she knew better to say that it was a UFO. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken this seriously. We were country people. We were farm people. You know, not a lot of houses. The closest store was 30 minutes away. We were out in the country, poor country folk, you know? So my mother said, something just crashed behind our house, you know, some sort of aircraft. She hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, the local police came. And keep in mind, throughout this whole situation, my family never left the house. So now I'm going to kind of break into what was going on simultaneously. You know, it's layered. So 10 minutes later, police come take my mom's statement. 25 minutes later, 2 black Lincoln Town cars pull up to our house. One man was from the Air Force, and the other 2 men were wearing the hats and the black suits. They looked like you and I, you know, but, you know, very clean shaved, light eyebrows, you know, just very light features. They came, they knocked on the door. My family let them in there. And at this point in time, the first responders, the fire trucks, were just arriving at the scene about 30 minutes later. So this is important because for these guys to get at our house where we lived within 25 minutes is mind-blowing within itself. So I'll go more about to the men in black, and then I will tell you the perspective from the first responders. So there was a lot going on. So the men in black come inside, and the man with the Air Force, he kind of stood off to the side. The men in black told my mom and her 2 friends to sit down on the couch. There was a coffee table in front of them. The men in black, they pulled out a notepad and a couple pencils, and they took the pencils. And this is important. I don't say this in a documentary. When they were holding the pencil, they were looking at it like they had no idea what it was. Like, I've never seen anyone so they seem completely normal, intimidating. But, you know, a lot of that can be like military tactics, you know? And I've done a lot of research into this. But when I saw them holding that pencil, and they were just like, they looked like they had no idea how to use it or what it was. That was probably the strangest thing that happened with all of this. So they sit my mom and her 2 friends down. They give them each a piece of paper and a pencil, and they tell them, draw 3 different kinds of aliens.
Was there any reason why they wanted them to draw 3 different kinds of aliens?
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
But, you know, from their perspective, my mom's 2 friends, now keep in mind, my mom was 22 years old, and her friends were young. Her other 2 friends started laughing. They started laughing. They thought these guys were joking, like, get out of here, right? So the men in black said, okay, you know, and they told the other 2 girls they can go ahead and leave. So they left for the night. Keep in mind, it was almost 11 o'clock at night. You know, they were tired. In the report, my mom talks about the night before being out and partying. You know, they were exhausted. And so my mother actually drew 3 different kinds of aliens. Turns out she drawed one she called the blues, I guess. Then a small gray alien, your typical, you know, movie gray alien. And then, you know, the Nordics, you know, the ones that look just like us. And she wasn't super artistic, but after she drew that, the men in black, you know, they talked to the officer or whoever this guy from the Air Force was, and he was trained in hypnotism. So they went ahead and they actually hypnotized my mother before they said anything else or anything like that. Turns out the military has been using Hypnosis, for example, if there is a military situation that gets out of control, you have a soldier, they need intel. That guy needs to remember it. But the, post-traumatic stress is too much.
So it's like a regression therapy.
It's exactly regression therapy. That is a perfect way. That's the best way to say it. So they went ahead and they proceeded. And then, my mom spilled all the beans. And up till this point, my mom, other than just having weird things, waking up with scars, and strange dreams, she had no idea what was going on. And through this regression, it all came back to her. This is a phenomenon that has went back to her being a baby, to a child. She dealt with it. It all came back to her. And after the Men in Black heard that, they told my mother, do you have any questions, and we'll answer them.
Yeah, before her, because her answers were fascinating, but were the men dressed in black, were they gobsmacked that she actually drew 3 aliens and where she would have got those images from?
No, that's weird. Like, they were so calm. Like, you could tell they worked for the military. Their manner, there was no very intimidating, more scary than the UFO that crashed. Yeah. The Men in Black are scarier than the aliens. I'm telling you.
Right.
And
yes, and so I've heard.
And it's insane that, we live in a world where that's what's going on. But so going back to, these Men in Black and what they were going to answer for my mother, my mom asked 3 simple questions. We were country folk, no university. She wasn't going to ask about technology or anything like that. We didn't even have cameras or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So basically what happened, my mother asked the Men in Black 3 simple questions. The first question was, are these things dangerous? The Men in Black replied, if they were dangerous, do you think we would still be here? My mom said, okay, thanks. They were very quick, straight to the point. No long definitions, just very quick. Second question my mom had, if these things are real, why don't people know about them? And the Men in Black said, we're doing everything we can by preconditioning. Within the next 10 years, you will see signs of it in movies, books, media, music, all over, cable television. And my mom said, okay. But a little side note, it's interesting because my whole life I've known about this. So when they told us 10 years, I always thought this closure was going to be in 2001.
Right.
But we know what happened then. So that was a huge disappointment because my family, we kept these things to ourselves. But I watched, I paid attention. I knew they had a timeline. And so anyway, that's besides the point. Going back to the last and third question. The last and third, after my mom having this regression and remembering all these things, she realized how real they actually are. Mm-hmm. And she asked the Men in Black, when these beings are taking me and my child, 3.5 years old, is here, and my elderly grandfather that she took care of that lived there, she said, when I'm gone, what if something happens to them and I'm not here to take care of it? What happens? Right? That is a motherly, a mother question. She could ask anything about the universe, all this. The only thing my mom cared about was protecting me. All right. And this comes in play later. So with that, they said, when they take you, small grays, the Zeta grays stay behind. They're just workers, slaves. They stay behind. And if anything was to happen to your child or grandfather, they would have you back, and then they snap their fingers like that. Really weird, to say we would have you back like that. And my mom said, okay, thank you. And that was that. And they said, okay, before we leave, tomorrow, there are going to be media outlets coming here, UFO investigators, which they did come. And they said, when they come, you will say it was a helicopter, or we will take your son away.
Wow.
And, a lot of the things my mom brought up in this, hypnosis regression therapy, it kind of spilt the beans on things that, didn't help our case at all. So along with this, my mom was terrified. You heard her last question. They obviously knew she cares about her son. So they said that. Then they went on their way. And that was that. So now, do you have any questions about that part?
Yeah. Did she ever speak about it again?
She did, anonymous, like through alternate names. And that's a part of the mystery, which I can get into towards the end, talking about the articles and what's going on.
And I had another question about your mum, but before that, I was interested when you said that before the craft crashed, a white beam of light shot into it, and it sparks everywhere. Do you think it was shot down from below? That was my first impression.
It almost seemed like something like there was cloud coverage. The clouds were at 1,100 feet. They were low. It was raining. It almost seemed like something came down from above it, very, very like in a flash, white beam, and just a bright white flash, not like a normal color explosion of, any aircraft that we are, accustomed to seeing crashing. And, it did have a white light from underneath of it. So whether this thing came from underneath of it or top with the sparks shooting out and with it already having a white light underneath of it, it would have been really hard to tell if that came from there or there. But to us, it just looked like this, boom, real quick.
And it was a triangle shape?
Yes.
Because the from my experience, well, not experience, but from what I've been told in a lot of interviews, is that it seems the greys are associated with the triangle-shaped craft.
The tall whites. Unfortunately, there's many different species that work with, different crafts and certain ones that use the same styles. But this one, unfortunately, belonged to the tall whites, which are known to be very old. Nice. And not very nice. And, we can make our own conclusions that maybe there was something protecting my mother and my family. Why was this thing hovering behind our house to begin with? And then through my mom's regressions, finding out that there was a connection. And most of her experiences were good and positive, but she did have a couple where she says she wasn't afraid, but they were nasty and they didn't really care.
Yeah,
and that's them.
I spoke with, and you know her too, Elena Dannon.
Oh, yeah, she was in part 3.
And she and Will, we spoke with her recently. The Greys haven't been very kind to her during her contact experiences, but she seems to be pretty heavily protected by the Nordics and the Blues, which your mother drew.
Yeah,
So getting back to your mother, so she found out at that moment that she had been a contact experiencer.
Yes. And through that regression. And Elena's story, I actually just got her book. She sent it to me. She actually dedicated it to my mother. It's beautiful what she wrote in there. And her experience is so similar to mine. That's what makes it amazing. And that's why I had her in part 3, because she was the only one that could really understand what my mother went through. But so getting back, we can get back into that. But so getting back to the time of the crash. All right. So this whole time while the men in black were at our house and my family was there, throughout the night, my mom was on the phone with search helicopters. They had 3 or 4 search helicopters going. So now I'm going to tell you about 30 minutes after my mother called the authorities about the crash, what happened from the perspective of other witnesses and of first responders. So this is what happened. As the fire trucks were coming up, and I actually have a little map right here. You can see right there.
Yep.
Where the crash site. Now that's a little road, and there's marsh and wetlands all around it. And right near that arrow is where that bridge is at. So it's a very, wooded area, but a lot of marsh and open. So as the fire trucks were going up that road you saw where the arrow was, as they were approaching, they were stopped, and they saw a Coast Guard boat out in the meadow, out in the creek, out in the water. And there was soldiers on land, and they were armed from the Coast Guard. And they looked at the fire truck and waved them down and said, the situation is under control, and ordered them to turn back around. And there was, I think, 3 firefighters on the truck at that time, And so that's what they did. They turned back around. But after they got back to the station, they, were talking about it. And other eyewitnesses that were there and heard them talking about it. And they said as they were coming up to the site, they saw, debris and gouges in the marsh, huge gouges, and rifts in there. And they witnessed a black tarp and, the military men from the Coast Guard on the boat and on land, securing the area. And they went back, and that's what they said. And after they went back, a few people that were at the firehouse, after hearing this speculation, they got curious. We're country people, so they got in their cars. I had 2 or 3 other witnesses. They went down there, and by that time, after they got there, which would have been probably maybe an hour and a half later, they witnessed flatbed trucks. They actually called a tree service to come in there and cut down a couple trees so they could get into the wreckage area, because it wasn't water and it wasn't land. It was marsh. It was right in the middle, made it very difficult. So they hired tree cutting company, and they witnessed flatbed trucks with material loaded on with a black tarp covered over it. And that was from that perspective. Now, why was the Coast Guard here and involved? It's because very, very, very close, not far at all, is the Salem County nuclear plant. So This thing was hovering, and that's the thing. We don't know how long this was here. For the military to be there before the firefighters got there, that's impressive.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it was hovering there. That could have been on their radar, before my aunt saw it. And after this, the men in black, after they left our house, they went around, and there was other witnesses. They reassured them that it was a helicopter that was never found. And, this is all the same night. So there's a lot of commotion. That very same night, that bridge closed down and remains closed till this day.
Wow.
It's shut down. It's not open.
So something was collected. Something was collected and taken away.
Absolutely. Yes, it was. And the next day, MUFON came out. MUFON, that's actually who did a lot of the articles they made. And here's one, just kind of show you the thing. They reported it as, being a helicopter. They used different names because I believe that my mother told them about the men in black, and they understood they need to protect. If you read, they're like allegedly, they're very cautious with what they say. And at a later time, not the day after, but about a week and a half or 2 weeks later, MUFON came back and did a hypnotherapy session with my mom and had a bunch of strange occurrences, and they were there taking pictures, which I can't find any. Recently, George A. Filler, retired Air Force intelligence. He works with the National UFO Center. He has his own thing. He's been trying to help me find more information about this. And there was actually a television show that came and did something, but it was never aired. We don't know. There was a news report, which in the MUFON articles, when our local news came and did the report, they have that in there. So there was a lot of action, and my mother was adamant about calling it a helicopter, even though officially, all the military bases were called FAA, Flight Administration was called, local airports. No one had any missing craft, nor was that any sort of flight path for any craft to be on. Yeah. It was a complete mystery, empty-handed. No one talked about it. The men in black went around reassuring people that heard or saw something that it was a helicopter. And yeah, that was almost it.
What about you, Robert, as a child? Can you remember yourself, after the incident and, when you started school, can you remember talking to other kids about it?
That's the thing. From, hearing from my family throughout the years, my mother and I were really close. I was having really bad nightmares at the time, and my family, you would hear them yelling, and my grandfather yelling at my mom, when she was talking about it and saying, "You're scaring the youngin', you're scaring the youngin', you're scaring him." And I was having nightmares. I was really into the alien movies, and I had the toys, but they would come with comics. So they started like taking the comics away from me and stuff. And I don't really remember if I went to school the next day and talked about it, but I can only imagine if I did, who knows, the response. And I didn't really talk about it. I was too young to understand, but all around me in the movies and the movie E.T. and all this, I had all of this around me, but I was always told it was fake. So to be right about 4 years old when your mind finally starts working and you find out everything you thought was a lie is actually real, and vice versa, it's overwhelming. And unfortunately, as a child around, 6, 7 years old, I would see my mother at parties, standing around the bonfire. I would be there sitting on a log. Someone would bring up aliens casually, and my mom would go ahead and tell the story very selectively. She didn't go around advertising this, Yeah. And these are her friends. These weren't random Joes. And she would tell the story, and they would laugh at her and say, "Oh, you're crazy." And my mom would start crying and run off. So at a very, very young age, I learned that I needed to just keep my mouth shut. And if I want to have friends and become successful, that's what I had to do. I went to Bible college. I became a pastor. I was a professional musician, traveled all over, CD and stores, toured. Excuse me. I was an English teacher in Turkey for 2 years. I've done a lot of things, and in the line of work that I was doing at the time, aliens and UFOs is not something you talk about.
No. So Robert, just two things again. I know the UFO was close to a nuclear facility, and it's it's widely known that UFOs are seen around nuclear facilities. So, do you think it was there for that, or perhaps it was there for your mother?
No doubt in my mind that man-made energy or natural energy is a natural conductor for these beings, to cause activity. Throughout my research, I've made a lot of discoveries, even had a witness from the same nuclear plant back in 1977 witnessing, a UFO above the plant, and it set off all the radiation alarms. And there are many other counts before the crash of triangular craft in the area. And it's amazing. And a lot of it's been documented through MUFON and other UFO researchers. And I definitely believe that plays a factor. And I think that it was just a bonus that, my mother and what they were doing and their experiment, I believe that they may want to experiment on human beings that live near these things, because we're a little different. I'm 6'8", red hair.
Wow.
I'm a mutant.
Yep. So What did you find out about your mother's previous experiences? I mean, was she able to talk about those?
Yes. So she really kept to the helicopter script, but the second time MUFON came down, she really, spilled the beans, just like with the Men in Black. They hypnotized her. The things my mom said was mind-blowing. She went through the processes that they were doing to her. Mostly the tall whites, those experiences are negative, but the experiences she had with the blues, they were doing tests and stuff, but they would always explain everything, very loving, very kind, and just guide my mom and give her short little messages, and they would come and go. Now, the experience that really stuck with her and really got in her head was the experience, she had with the tall whites. And she was being involved with this hybrid program, and they would extract her eggs and manipulate them in one way or another and put the egg back in my mother, allow the egg to incubate until it turns into an embryo. They would abduct my mother at a later time and remove that embryo to let it continue to develop on the ship. And during these times, through my mother's regressions, she remembered seeing, and here's the thing, after the first hypnotism she had, then there was no more screen memories. Every time these things happened after, she remembered. It broke a cloud. So throughout the years, hearing this over and over and actually hearing like the chain of events, and eventually, my mom was seeing her children, her hybrid children. She would be on like a table, and off in the corner, there would be some children that, looked very human, other ones that looked like really, really deformed, and other ones that, were like perfectly half gray alien. Imagine us with big old eyes, and she would see them, and they were all communicating telepathically. And, she really had a desire, to just want to love these children. She knew they were hers and she loved them. And she would beg, these beings, can I have one? Can I be with them? And they're like, no. They won't be able to survive on Earth, and, all that.
Yeah.
And just that longing. And my mom, that was one thing that always haunted my mom more than the abductions, more than the aliens, more than anything. And personally, now that I've recently lost my mom, shortly after finding these MUFON articles, these creatures are the only brothers and sisters, the only pieces of my mom I got left. And why can't I be with them? Right. So like my reason for disclosure is kind of selfish, but that's why I'm so adamant on, getting out of there and, recording and just asking the simple questions, just trying to prepare the way so people can, finally just start talking about this without feeling like they're crazy.
So you're on a mission. You're on a mission for disclosure.
Yes.
And a lot of it's personal. Are you getting any feedback from the information you're putting out there?
Yes. Actually, from the first part of my documentary, which I made a 3-part documentary, YouTube, Robert Earl White, The Order of Light. The Order of Light is a group I started where people can come and share their different abilities, experience. They could talk about past lives, crystals, just all positive, anything unexplained. It's all personal content, and it's a PG, family-friendly place. We leave religion and politics out of it, and it's just people that come there having strange dreams or encounters that they've never shared, and it's a private group, so they feel comfortable. And I've heard amazing stories that I'm working on getting out there, people that are coming to me for the first time with evidence that is mind-blowing, stuff you don't see on the internet. Yeah. Some of it I can't even share yet because they're still, worried. But the things that people are sending me and showing me, and the stories just recently, I can't really say who, but her mother and grandmother were involved with Roswell, and they were eyewitnesses, and they kept quiet, and the Men in Black, and she's an experiencer now. And at the time, her mom was only 4 years old, and she's never shared this story with anyone. So really like exclusive, great stories that are coming to me. And, you know, people are hearing my story, realizing that it's authentic. So I'm receiving authentic back.
Yeah. Are you surprised at the number of people that are coming forward and have had experiences? Because, I mean, if you just go by mainstream information, you'd think, well, it's only a handful of people. But we're talking, you know, tens upon tens of thousands of people.
When I was first really starting to learn about all of this, that's how I thought. But the truth is, this has been going on forever, since the beginning of humanity. It's just, this is just now the time where people start to remember. You know, that's the simplest way I could explain it. I believe that there are literally millions of people that have had some sort of contact, whether they're aware of it or not. And I believe once people start to come along in our evolution and, you know, evolve a little bit more, and we expand our minds to realizing we are not the only thing in the universe, I think we're going to see, you know, once you realize you're connected, these things are just bound to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through the feedback you get, Robert, you know, with the people coming forward, do they talk about like bad aliens and good aliens, and are we as humanity being looked after by, you know, the good aliens?
Well, firstly, I would like to say personally, I try not to believe in good or evil, but in, you know, earthly terms, you know, yes, there are negative entities and there are positive entities, not just on the physical plane, also on the, you know, interdimensional plane, and on many other. It's just the plurality of worlds, you know. There's always a positive, always a negative. You know, it's important to find that balance in the middle and stay there. But, you know, unfortunately, there are certain races and species where they're so old, they just don't think they have to answer to anyone. But there are many, many, many species, all different species. Even some of the bad species have good individuals in there working with the good ones. It's really like Star Wars. Yeah. It's truly amazing. There are federations and alliances of good ETs that are into protecting and exploring and gaining knowledge. And then there are those that are out to extort, you know, to get things.
I posted an article recently on arlhub.com, and it talked about disclosure, and I just don't think we're going to see like a mass disclosure, because I think disclosure has been happening for a long time through experiences, and it's all the individual stories that are now starting to filter out there. That is probably been a concern for those trying to suppress the truth, because I mean you can't suppress everyone, and the more people that hear about people's experiences, the more they're going to start to think, well, hey, you know, millions and millions of people can't be wrong when they're all talking about the same thing.
And then when everyone's talking about it, it becomes worse something. The Order of Light is a company. Make no mistake about it. I'm preparing the way. I know what's about to happen. My dad actually works within NASA and SEX and Air Force Base. He operates. He's worked on some awesome things. They're busy. And, you know, my whole life I've been waiting for this disclosure. And people like Elena and I, we're not waiting for it anymore. We're proclaiming it. You know, just like you said, when people start talking about this and everyone realizes when they come on my, group page on Facebook, the Order of Light, and they post something, they get people that understand and can share almost word for word what they went through. Yeah. And then the connection is made. And for the first time in that person's life, they realize they're not crazy. And then eventually when, this shift gets all done, which no good thing happens overnight. But when it, comes to that time and people start to realize that they're not the only ones, and, the governments realize, this is where the people are going, they won't have a choice.
Yeah. Couple more questions to wind it up, Robert. So do you think the people that have been covering this up will take any notice of what you're doing? I mean, have you noticed anything strange with your phone, with your lights?
Nope. Other than, basic YouTube algorithms and like just search options and things like that. No, I haven't had any problems, and I'm not going to have any problems.
So you don't feel like you're in any danger?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm so protected. I have no worries in the world, and I'm careful with what I say. And, I'm representing a lot of people, a lot of tribes, a lot of different backgrounds all over the world. I'm talking. I just had an interview in Italy that's done in Italian, like crazy, crazy things. I'm getting out there, and I'm protected. They want me to do this, I'm just preparing the way. Yes. I mean, they're coming.
Yes. I've heard Stephen Greer talk about this quite a bit, about the fact that, he was at one stage worried about his health and safety, but not anymore, because he's made sure that everyone knows about what he's done and what he's discovered.
Yep. And I'm truly protected, and I think, the powers that be, although I don't agree with them whatsoever, I think there's a mutual agreement of sorts. And, I'm careful with what I say and what I do, and I do everything in light and love and in a positive way. Too many movies painting these things out to be dangerous. I'm afraid that, unfortunately, EMP technology, could cause a massive mistake if our governments try to stage an alien invasion. These are concerns I have, and I just want to make sure that don't happen and get out in front of it, make it happen before, let everyone know, hey, there's good and there's bad, and you need to believe the good ones really have our back. The good ones have our back more than our governments do.
Right.
That's important for people to understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Last question. I had was going to ask you this a little bit earlier, but I turned my page and completely missed it. But it was when the men in black were telling your mum about, about more, the people are hearing about this more. And when you mentioned through Hollywood and, movies, and that a lot of the experts agree that Hollywood has played a big part in the disclosure topic by unwittingly. I don't know whether it's unwittingly, but it's as if they've been kind of used as pawns by putting out the movies they do, and what you hear from a lot of experiences, you find happens in a lot of these movies. So they seem to have been used as a way to kind of ease that information out to the public.
Absolutely. They have been. They really have been. And that's part of the preconditioning. And what they do is, they'll add a couple little tiny lies in there, to spice it up. So it keeps you in that doubt that if you don't want to believe it, you don't have to. You can call it science fiction. Yeah. But if you know, then there's more going on to it. And let me tell you, the best way to hide something is by putting it right in front of people's faces.
Hide it in plain sight. Yep.
Hide it in plain sight.
Yep.
And this has been going on for a long time, long before I was born. It's a big plan.
Okay, well, Robert, we thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
And sure, a lot more people will know about the Lower Alloways Creek Incident, and I'm really sorry for your loss of your mother earlier this year. Our condolences to you and your family, and once again, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Paul Wallace is an archdeacon for the Anglican Church in Australia. He's also a theological educator. No one would question his faith in God as a Christian, but like myself and countless others, he had questions as a child. Certain aspects of what he was being taught and explained didn't make sense. Wallace began to question, and the more he did, the more pushback he got.
Well, Escaping from Eden was really my gateway into this whole topic, the whole topic of paleo contact. And it opened up for me because of studies I've been making in the book of Genesis, drilling down into some odd moments in the story that had never quite made sense to me and into some translation issues. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that if you revisit the translation questions, go at the etymology of the words in the text, it turns out that many of the stories that we've understood as God stories turn out to be summaries of ancient Sumerian stories, which are not about God, but about sky people, people from other planets who came and colonized the earth in the distant past and had a hands-on involvement in our development as a species. And that's just the beginning of the story. So that took me to writing Escaping from Eden. It was essentially me sharing that journey from a world of 33 years in ministry and then into this field of study and then opening up the whole question of a populated universe. And yes, it's been an international bestseller. I don't think it made the New York Times list. Maybe The Scars of Eden will, but it's certainly sold huge all around the world. And as I was preparing for Escaping from Eden to come out, I thought maybe I should prepare my parents-in-law for this new book that's coming because they're devout Christians. Mm-hmm. They're from Ghana. They are Baptist, Pentecostal. Those are their roots. And a book with the title, Does Genesis Teach That Humanity Was Created by God or Engineered by ETs, might be a little bit confronting. So I better prepare them. So they came around for the weekend and we had some nice food and some nice wine. And when everyone was happy and relaxed, I thought, okay, I'll bring the subject up now. And so I said, Patience Coffee, let me just tell you about this new book I've got coming out. And I walked them through what I just told you, Dean, about what I think the Bible's really about in some of those ancient texts. And I had no idea how they were taking this. They were, poker faces on as they were listening. And then when I finished explaining, my father-in-law leant back in his chair and he said, Paul, a penny has dropped. And clearly he had had all kinds of wonderings and questions about things he had seen in the Bible as well. And then my mother-in-law leant forward and said, Paul, we already know this story. And she began telling me that in Ghana, yes, through school, you will be taught the Christian answers to things and the scientific answers to things, just as we do generally going through school, the mainstream views. But the folklore carries other stories.
Right.
And the Ghanaians know through their ancestral storytelling that there is another presence on planet Earth that is similar to human, but not human, that has a hands-on involvement in our affairs as a species, and that from time to time takes individuals, uses them for some kind of hybridization program, and then returns them a few years later. This is the story of Mami Wata in Ghana. And my mother-in-law said, actually, our family is very, very close to another family where this happened. And she told me about this girl who disappeared for 3 years. I say girl, she was an adult, a young adult, disappeared for 3 years.
Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods played a huge part in Wallace gaining the courage to eventually seek answers, and it led to his much-acclaimed first book, Escaping from Eden. It was a crushing success, attracting millions of readers worldwide, during who had the same questions. But it also gained him a lot of criticism and dissension from his peers, which he expected. And that's coming up on the next episode of the Aliens Revealed Live Files. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.